You think you're gonna mess with me? Well, guess what, buddy? I got 5 dragons. Yeah. Welcome back to the TV Corner, everybody. Today we are talking about the House of the Dragon. House of the Dragon is the prequel series to Game of Thrones set 200 years before its events, in which the Targaryens claimed the Iron Throne and ruled Westeros, and the events leading up to their infamous Civil War. It stars Millie Alcock, Emma Darcy, Matt Smith, Olivia Cooke, Emily Carey, Paddy Considine, and Rhys Ifans. So I have talked a little bit about Game of Thrones on this channel. I haven't too much, mostly because, anything that I would have said has probably already been said, but I did do that one video, actually I think it was this year, where I talked about what I thought were the good things of Season 8, because, I think there were some good things amidst the tragedies.
You are my queen.
Because, arguably based on season, but up to that point, Game of Thrones was on track to be one of the best, if not the best show ever made, according to most people at least. And so when all of that happened, and then they were coming out with House of Dragon only a couple years later, it wasn't that it was unexpected, but I didn't really have a lot of hype for it, and I thought, they're probably just going to mess it up. I don't know. I wasn't really sure how to think about it. I probably honestly wasn't thinking about it too much because I didn't want to get myself too hyped for it, but I have to say, they pulled it off. They pulled it the crap off. It just feels immediately like we are back in this world of Westeros, and I don't know how they do it, but they did such a good job of having a prequel where it feels like you're in the same world, and it is different. It's not completely the same stuff, so it feels like, oh, it's just a money grab, but it's also not so different that you're like, I hate this. It's like they did a really good job of mixing those together. They had a very good blend of nostalgic stuff, but then also a lot of new things. It was very, very cool to see, obviously, all the old stuff that we know, things like Hand of the King, or like just certain greetings that they have, or yes, later in the season, they do start to hit you over the head, on purpose, probably, with all of the mentioning other houses and all these other people. They're like, oh, they said it, they said the Starks. But the point is that they actually did a really good job of having those things while also introducing a lot of new stuff that we've heard about, but we hadn't really seen before. Like a lot of these other dragons. And honestly, the Targaryens in Game of Thrones were kind of like the Airbenders in Avatar. There's only like a few of them, and all we really do is hear about them. But now we're seeing all the dragons. Now we're seeing all the Targaryens, and it's just really, really cool. Plus, we get to see 2 new houses and families that we've never really even seen before. We've heard about one of them, the Valerians, but I don't think I'd ever really heard much about the Hightowers. So it was cool to just see all of this coming together, all this new stuff, while being in the same world. And yeah, the dragons, dude. Oh my god, we've only gotten, scratched the surface. We've only scratched the surface of the dragons that are going to be in the show, evidently, because by the end, I think they named, 15 or so dragons that might be appearing in the next couple seasons. And it's been so cool already because we've just in the first 10 episodes had so many action scenes with dragons and dragon flight scenes and everything. It's been really cool. But specifically in terms of things that are just as good as Game of Thrones in this show, the look of it, the cinematography is just as gorgeous as ever. I think that is a huge part for this TV show of why people can take it so seriously, because with a lot of TV shows, they have small budgets, and they don't look too good. They look like, you have a good plot, you got a good story, good acting, but the show looks like it's a TV show. But they are not limited here, and boy, they just kill it all the time. The look it just looks so official, and like they have a huge budget, which they do. But they just do such a good job with it. It looks gorgeous. And the acting as well is just so good, and it helps that the script is really well written. But the acting for Game of Thrones, they just have a really good knack for casting people, which I will get to in a second. But for the most part, the casting was really, really well done. And the acting is just going along with that was just so, these really tense scenes especially, because this season very much has parallels to season 1 of Game of Thrones in that it's very much about family struggles, and these little tense moments before all-out war is going to break out. It's a lot of tense moments, and it's a lot of introducing these characters who are going to have specific dynamics later on that will affect very, very great things. So it has all that suspense, all that tension, all that this could go in any one direction. But I think it's even more for this one, because whereas Game of Thrones was very confusing, admittedly, at first, because it's a couple people per faction, but there's like tons of factions throughout the series. This one is a ton of people in one place. And all of these people in this one place are weaved together so much that they are all related and connected in like 5 different ways each. Like, it's the Targaryens. So, incest. And so it's very interesting trying to keep track of these characters, because not only are there so many, but it's like, oh, you're the uncle, but also the brother, and you are the niece, but also his wife, and your children are their children's uncles, but also kind of connected in terms of cousins, and it's like, what the hell? This is weird, man. It's just weird. So the plot is really, really fun to follow, because it is just all these people, and there are definitely 2 clear sides by the end of the season, but there are a lot of moving back and forth, and there are people who you're not really sure where they're going to land by episode 10. It all is just served by the acting, specifically Paddy Considine, who I think is the new fan favorite for the Game of Thrones franchise. There is one scene specifically that everyone was just like, that was incredible. That was so well done. The acting was great. The emotion was great. It was really sad. It was a really good scene. But I think if we're talking about the thing that excited me the most, that was like Game of Thrones, that they did bring back the theme song. They brought back the theme song, guys. They didn't for like the first or 1 or 2 episodes, and I was like, all right, they might still, it's usually different for the first episode or 2, and then episode 3, they did. And it's a whole new title sequence, and anybody who's seen Game of Thrones knows that, honestly, I might just go to the next episode just to watch the title sequence again. And this one, it was a whole new one. It's not as interesting, I will say, but there is a specific reason for it, but it is visually just as cool. And God, Ramin Djawadi, yes! My first middle is one thing that they do a lot in this season, and that is time jumps. And you all know that I am not a huge fan of time jumps. I think they kind of cheapen things sometimes, because where they are necessary at times, for me, I'm like, okay, when you're in a TV show, specifically a TV show where its whole thing is looking deep into a small amount of time, but a lot going on, time jumps just feel like you're just ruining it. And I'm getting into these characters, and then I'm like, okay, well, if all this stuff happened in like a 2-month period, why are we skipping like 6 years? I'm not a huge fan of it. However, I will say that in this instance, there was one specific reason that it seemed necessary, because there was stuff we had to be introduced before, and then there were things that were going to happen after a specific event, but nothing was going to happen until that event took place. And so the in-between was like, well, we don't really have much else that we need to cover. So I can see how it was, fine and necessary, but it does also get into a low, which I'll get into in a second. God, why is it always so dark in here? I'm so sorry, guys. It is about to rain, but we're just going to go with it. My other middle is actually Damon, played by Matt Smith. He's really, really good. Don't get me wrong. Matt Smith is awesome. It's not about the acting. It's about the way his character is written, because I know that in Game of Thrones and shows like these, you have very vague characters who you have to judge things by their actions and what they say, and you have to let it play out, and maybe we'll find out later on what their true intentions were. But it just feels like they didn't really know what to do with his character. It felt, because like at first it's like he's kind of the villain, and then he's not, and then he sort of is, and you're not really sure. And it just feels like he does like a 180, almost. I just wasn't really sure almost even what he wants. At first I was like, ooh, he's mysterious. Let's see where this gets to. And by the end I was like, he's still kind of mysterious. I don't exactly know what he wants. Like, I do, but then he does some things and I'm like, I felt like you wouldn't have done that. I don't know. Maybe it's just me being dumb. I could also say a little bit of the same about Rhaenyra. It's not as bad. She definitely has some clear goals. But there are some things when she's younger that I'm like, which kind of life do you want here? I could get into that if I talked about spoilers. My only 2 lows, besides this dark-ass lighting, is basically going along with the time jump aspect. The time jump decision itself was fine, like I said, but there were 2 aspects that came with it that I didn't love. One was that they aged some characters, and not others. And I mean aged by, like, they chose like older actors, which makes sense. But some characters are old enough that you could make them up to be, it's the same actor, but make them up to look older. But there are some characters that I'm like, it's been like 10 years and they look exactly the same, and it just didn't make sense to me. The other thing about that is that, again, in the casting department, they are phenomenal, except they chose for some of the children, like, you have like a sibling and their younger sibling. But when they had the time jump, they made in both sides, I feel like they took the younger sibling and casted someone who looked way older than the older sibling. So it was like really confusing. And I was like, wait, and it's already confusing trying to figure out who's which child and what their names are. But if they hadn't had certain like physical qualities about them, I would have been hecka confused. But I thought that was just a very odd casting choice overall. Not that like doesn't happen where a younger sibling looks older as both of them get older, but that's only fine for me if we watch them grow up. But if you just choose different people and they just look so much different, but they're not the right, it's weird for me. So overall, The House of the Dragon very much surprised me in how good it was, how invested in it I am already, and my God, after the ending of this first season, I am pissed that I'm actually watching a Game of Thrones show in real time now, because now I actually have to wait. Ugh! It's so good. It was really fun, very suspenseful, very intriguing. I love the characters. It's really good, guys. And I'm really excited to see where this goes. I didn't think I'd be interested in the Targaryens, of all the houses, but I think that they have, come out to be some of the more interesting ones because they are very insane. I'm going to give House of the Dragon Season 1 a 3.5 out of 4. Well, guys, let me know what you thought of the House of the Dragon, and let me know if it's raining there too, because apparently that's what's happening. And I mean, I guess this is a good metaphor for like the season. Like, it starts out kind of light and fun, and then it gets really dark. That's what I'm going with. I did this on purpose. And as always, keep your hopes high, your stress low, and TV shows right in the middle. I'll see you guys later.